Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm delighted that we have the ability to get together again to continue some of what we talked about last week and to maybe enter, I hope, some new turf as well. I'm grateful to Lydia Lutt for many things as the remarkably gifted and profound force behind our communications, our marketing, making all of our technology work, even from Virginia, which is suffering from cold weather that we will try eventually to take back. But what is probably less known to everyone is that she has a very remarkable and powerful personal story to tell that is directly related to our topic. So I really look forward to hearing what she has to share with us, because I think that it will be very enriching for us to hear what she has to say about Judaism is about from her perspective. And I look forward to her thoughts to be shared with all of us, and your reactions as well as we proceed tonight. So, Lydia.
Okay, I will try and live up to that introduction. Thank you, Rabbi. So I am a Jew by choice. Many of you had the good fortune, I would say, of being born into this faith. And so I actually went through my conversion with Rabbi Rosen. No pressure to him. We wrapped up my conversion. I think I was 9.5 months pregnant. And so we finished right before my first child, Jack, was born. We finished about I've been a Jew, I guess, by choice for 13 years. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my family and how we got here. So when I think of Judaism, I think of the family that I married into. So in the upper left of your screen there, you see this black and white photo. That is my mother and father-in-law, Roz and Erwin Lutt. And as you can see from the fact that they're at a junior Hadassah dance, the synagogue was everything for them. It's a family of 6. You can see that lovely picture in the middle. My husband, Howie, is the young one poking his head through the middle of everyone. He has 3 older siblings, and they grew up in the synagogue. Rosie and Erwin, I'm sure, I don't know, I think my husband has left, he would correct me. One of them ran bingo nights. All of their friends the majority of their friends were at the synagogue. Howie and his 3 siblings, it's so funny because I'll say, well, whose friend is this? Because Howie had one sibling as a friend who had a friend who someone had, a sibling who was 2 years older, who was also friends with Donald, or, oh, this was Dina's friend. They were together and they were at the synagogue all the time. Howie will talk about and had told Rabbi Rosen, we used to play handball on Shabbat with the ping pong balls that we had hidden in the youth room. They were there all the time. Howie's mom was one of the first to have an adult bat mitzvah. And there were men in the synagogue who got up and left because she read the Torah from the Bima and they didn't think that was appropriate. And she did it anyway because she knew what was right. We have a family Haggadah that's long, but that she made. And it talks about, she wrote it all, and there's an orange on the Seder plate because just like there was a time when women belonged on the Bima like an orange on the Seder plate. So we always have that on our Seder plate for Passover because of Ras. You can see, so Howie, as the youngest of 4, and waited too long to marry me, we have very young children when Rosie and Erwin were very old. But they loved our boys so much. And we always did, anytime you would go to visit, usually there was a Jewish thing. We always did Passover together. The first time I met the bigger family was Passover with, 48 people in the basement of a church that we had rented. But that was a typical event. Hanukkah was going over to cousin Richie's house. Passover was at Rosie's. Vi had Hanukkah. It was always, everything was together. And you can see in the lower right, this is a photo from my son's bar mitzvah this past fall. And this is that cohort. It's cousins, it's Lutz, it's Rosenbergs, it's, you know, you go out one ring from your intermediate family and you've got 36. You know, you have cousins, but cousins who are like buddies. So when Howie and I got married, we were married under the chuppah, but the person who married us got his letter to be a clergy person one day during his children's nap time. No offense to all the study that Rabbi Rosen did to become someone who marries people. But this was a friend of ours, but we wanted Jewish touches, we knew. But it wasn't a major factor for us, for me to be Jewish. And I remember when we got engaged, forgive me, I'm just getting over the flu. I remember when we got engaged that night, we sat across the table from Rosie, and she said, Howie said something about conversion came up. And she said, I don't care if you convert. I don't care what you are. All I care is that you love my son. And Howie joked that maybe it was his gay brother's Catholic partner who made her feel that way. And she said, no, maybe it's all the Jewish daughter-in-laws I've seen over time. No shade on Jewish daughter-in-laws. Just, it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not. What matters is that you're a good person who loves my son. And that's something I will never forget. You know, Rosie didn't, it wasn't important, right? So it wasn't important for me to be Jewish because, in part, my father is Jewish. Here on the left, this black and white photo, those are my paternal grandparents. They did not go to my parents' wedding because my father is Jewish and my mother is Presbyterian. And in the end, they decided that they did not approve. And they wrote a letter to my father saying as such, that they would not be in attendance at the wedding. So, forgive me, it doesn't make me emotional anymore. I'm 40 years old, it's okay, but forgive me. So all along, I was raised, you can see I'm the little one there on the right with my Easter basket. We were raised Presbyterian. And yes, as everyone has said, you are your mother's daughter. They have said that everywhere I've ever gone in the state of Alabama. I am lucky to be that way. You know, I was raised with a mother who always said, it's easier if you marry someone of the same faith. And as I got older, I began to understand more about, you know, they had religious reasons for not supporting this marriage. But, you know, my mom had real concerns about Rosie and Erwin until she met them and knew that they were not like her in-laws. You know, I said, look, the Jews that I know are not the way you're talking about. They're so nice, Mom. You got to meet them. They're so nice. And my mom raised two women of faith, is what I remind her. And you can see I'm there. My mom is in the middle, and that's my sister, Megan, also from the bar mitzvah. My sister converted to Catholicism when she got married. So we clearly got the message that it's easier to marry someone of the same faith. I don't think it was the message my mom was trying to send, but that's what we perceived, at least. My parents are since divorced. They got divorced about 10 years ago. And it had nothing to do with the fact that my father was a non-practicing Jew, but I think my mother carried a lot of that with her. And there's been a big part of me that has made sure to show her that what she experienced is not the Judaism that I know. And as I think about my own sons, it's funny, I want them to marry a Jewish girl. And so I understand even more, like I can understand where my parents' parents were coming from. And I hope I'm never in that. I don't think I would ever make the decision that they did. And I have always advised my peers and such that you need to be on the right side of history. It doesn't, you can say what you want to a point, but after that, you need to let it go. But I'll say that my sons are only 11 and 13, and I mention how great it is to do all these family things together. And we'll see. But, so family is complicated, as it is for everyone, right? But for me, I am a proud Jew in my family, and I am supported as such, because we support each other in everything. We try. So family is a big part of being Jewish. Community is also a big part. So you'll see this terrible picture. I couldn't find a better one. So I converted just before our first child was born, and we got married under the Beth El Chuppah for our 5-year anniversary. And that's when we learned why you have children after you get married, because trying to hold them through a wedding ceremony is not ideal. But we made it. And, I don't know if I would have thought it was that big of a deal. And maybe going into it, I think, I bought a dress like the week before or something. But whenever I have to take my rings off, I don't take that one off. It's a simple band. And it just reminds me of my commitment with Howie and my faith at the same time, and commitments in general in the Jewish world. And it's just another reflection for me of my religion, my faith, back to my life. There are ways in which it's not that I looked for something, pardon me, not that I looked for something that I could fit into. It just fit me, if that makes sense. So, pardon me. So in Bethel, we've had these amazing Jewish experiences. Rory waited so long to be born that we kicked him out right before the Jewish New Year. And we were blessed to be able to write the last letter in the Torah that Bethel scribed. We made sure to lord that over all of our baby friends who were at Bethel at the time. And so we will remember that the Lamed is the last letter in the Torah until we die. Part of the Bethel community that was so amazing. So Ron Buckman, you see in that picture, it's not that I love, I have great adoration for what Dr. Buckman does, but this was a picture from my first son's bris. As a Presbyterian, we don't do this. I had never had this many people in my house before. I couldn't believe it. Rabbi, I look back now and I'm like, it was like a week before Rosh Hashanah. Like I can't, or no, it was like between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I cannot imagine all the things, actually, I can't imagine all the things you were going through and dealing with and whatever. And then came to my house, we had a beautiful bris, and you went back to work. But my house has never been so clean as this moment. Howie's parents' friends came in. These women, I don't know what happened. They fed me. They put out amazing spread. And then it was all cleaned up, tidied, and it was out. They were kicking people out. Like, okay, we're done. We've kibitzed, we're done, out. They need to rest. And it was the most amazing thing I had ever experienced. And I also think from this moment of Lois Coteen, I don't know if she's on, I have no idea. But Lois Lois held my family together for a lot of those early years. I had meningitis. I was hospitalized. I had to have surgery, and then it was without fail. Lois dropped off a meal, high-fived the kiddos, and was out the door. She's like, I'm not staying. I'm like, Lois, stay. No, goodbye. Here's your food. Goodbye. I don't want nothing. We're done. And I have tried to emulate that now in my life because it meant so much to me. The community just meant so much to me. Okay, I have to speed up. So here in Virginia, we have also found a great community, one that has allowed me personally in my practice, abortion bans are against my religion. And we as a synagogue have worshiped outside of a clinic that provides health services to women at 6 a.m. on Shabbat, on some Shabbat mornings, to provide our support to the workers who are going to work. That's my son's, that's our synagogue where we just needed, we needed a synagogue that had great kids programming. And ours does. They have an amazing Hebrew education. Jack recently became bar mitzvah, and we're really excited. But having a Jewish community is one thing. We also make sure that we are Jewish, in the community. So for us, that means that our kids, they play hockey, they play baseball. They're going to miss some of those for Hebrew school. And we had one of our baseball teammates say to us once, who would have thought the Jews would miss Sunday morning practice? And it was, clear that none of them go to church on Sundays because they prioritize baseball. And we are definitely the most religious of our peer set. And we are proudly so. It just is what it is, right? This is a priority for us. We've told our children, you are going to be athletes for a season, but you're going to be Jews for life. So you're going to Hebrew school this morning, it's because this is who we are, and this is what we're going to prioritize. I'm going to grab a tissue. One second. Our community has we have a community association, and we have a Christmas decoration contest every year. And the first year, friends of our children were so excited to see our house because we're the festival of lights, until they realized that we don't put up lights for the festival of lights. That was the only time I felt bad about that. I was like, well, I totally love why you came, but I'm sorry, we don't do that. But gosh darn it, on social media, you bet I put a picture on the Villamay Community Association, social Instagram page to say, hey, to all our neighbors, the two of you celebrating Hanukkah, we send you, happy holidays. Because it's important for me, for people to know that we are here. On my personal social media, like my Instagram, right there alongside, like, hey, I cleaned my kids' sneakers today. I bake challah on Fridays. And it's part of who I am now. If you invite me to dinner on a Friday night, you're probably my one Jewish friend in our neighborhood who we have Shabbat dinner with. But I'm bringing the bread. This is an established fact. But so we are proudly Jewish in our community. And then the last thing I'll say is, I was not a Zionist at the beginning of this journey. I wasn't raised Southern Baptist, where I guess we support Israel. Presbyterians didn't really talk a lot about it, at least that I remember. And I struggled. I remember talking to Rabbi Rosen about, this Netanyahu guy, I don't know. And settlements, I don't know. It just seems, it's difficult. And I didn't even think about it, to be honest, more than that. And then October 7th happened. And I took a class about Zionism and anti-Zionism offered through our synagogue. And I learned that there's a difference between supporting Israeli politics and Zionism. And I learned the history of Zionism. I'm reading a book alongside a friend about modern Zionism, and how modern Zionism came to be. And, we didn't even know that the march was happening until like 2 days before. Howie's brother, one of them, said, "I'm coming into town for the march." What are you talking about? There are marches all the time in DC. Like, what are you talking about? And then another friend was like, "Hey, I'm going to go to the march. You going to go to the march?" I said, "Howie, what is this march? What should we do?" "All right, let's go. It's on a Wednesday, we're taking the kids. It's important that the kids know what is going on." We've talked to them about it. And it was the most amazing experience to be on the mall, to cry with everyone, to feel seen with everyone who was there. It was remarkable. And so I still have the same, I don't know about that, or I don't think that's the right call. But I pay a lot more attention now than I did before. And I'm aware of it. And I'm aware of what anti-Semitism looks like. And I'm aware of where it's easy for people to just recite the tropes. And anyway, it has led to a lot of conversations. And I will say I am a proud Jew. I am a proud Zionist. And I have shared that with my friends. And when they have shared certain things that may be hurtful, I say to them, I want you to know that from my perspective, that's hurtful. And I've engaged in those conversations unabashedly because, look, I say, you're my friend. And if I walked out with something, a shirt that was upsetting to you, I hope you would say something. If I embarrassed myself in some way, I hope you would help me. And so I don't think that you're doing this to hurt me, but I want you to know that you are. It hasn't always gone well, and that's okay. But, as we look at this slide that Rabbi Rosen shared with us last week about some statements of the essence of Judaism, a people, a race, a text tradition, a religion, a system of faith and behavior, a Jewish state, a guardian of memory, a defender against anti-Semitism, a promoter of social justice, a social critic, a promoter of human progress, and a free thinker. The things I've shared tonight are things that are, for me, all the time and embedded in my Judaism. But I feel like I am all of these at some point. These all resonate with me, and I may not be all of them every day, but I think I am some of them all the time. And that fits with who I would be, whether I had met Howie and then met Rabbi Rosen, and like, if this life had been different, I feel like I would have been the same. But now it's like I have this piece that fits. And that's what Judaism is about to me. So if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to put them in the chat or ask them. But I'll stop talking since I went over. I'm sorry. And Rabbi Rosen, it's all you.
Lydia, thank you so much. We all got a glimpse of the depth of who you are and the power of what you bring to our community. While you were speaking, it occurred to me to ask the question of the entire group that's here tonight, and that is, knowing what you do know about the Jewish experience, Jewish history, Jewish values, Jewish possibilities. If you were not Jewish, would you see yourself freely choosing to become a Jew? Would there be something compelling enough in all of that we have experienced that would say, you know what, this is something I wish to be a part of? Because in our modern lives, to a very large extent, all of us are really free to be Jews by choice to whatever degree we would like to be. We're, of course, free to choose to be entirely something different. But that, I think, is a part of exactly who we are, because we have that kind of freedom. And I'm delighted to see all of the thanks that are coming your way, Lydia, because it really was a very, very powerful and very, very moving presentation. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that how honored and pleased I have been, and others here in this community, to be with you along this very remarkable journey. This also allows for us to contemplate something that I hope you will ponder, in addition to the question of how much would you choose to be Jewish, how much you would choose a particular expression of Judaism, given that freedom, if you weren't already born into it, as it were. And that is the whole idea of, here we are, born into what we simply will call a people. Not everybody, in the course of our encounters in life, would actually agree to that definition, that Jews are a people. There are those in the world who would deny that. They would say that we're just an offspring of a group from the wilds of Russia that somehow got to be the Khazars who converted or became this people, and then were descendants from that like 1,000 years ago, not 4,000 years ago. We are, according to some scholars, in the entirety of biblical history as a myth, and there was no Jewish presence until around the time of the Greeks. All of those kinds of things have been statements that have been made, but I think that there's an agenda behind them. And we, for our part, have identified ourselves with the idea that we are a people. And so much so that we are intuitively and very powerfully willing to stake our necks out when we feel a need to be on the defensive, as well as to be able to tout some strengths and accomplishments. It would be really inappropriate of us to even begin to dismiss the realities of anti-Semitism. So if we could go on to the next slide, it's something that we have to respond to, because this is directed against Jews as a people. I brought really a fairly brief history of the experiences of the last several years. There are others, somewhat lesser known, things that are have affected individuals. But we forget that back in 2009, there was a shooting at the Holocaust Museum of a security guard. That there was, we may remember Charlottesville, we remember certainly Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, but shortly after that, there was Muncie, stabbing at Muncie during a Hanukkah gathering. Chabad Poe, we have actually twice on there. The last one on the list, the Colleyville, Texas one, which fortunately ended in the safety of those who were taken hostage, and that the rabbi of the community with the security training was able to foil the plot. These have been the catalyst for all of the security work that we have been doing, which kind of, we forget some of these things because COVID came in the middle of it all, but all of these kinds of necessities of protection has been really very much at the core of what we have had to do as congregations, balancing a desire, and institutions as a whole, to be welcoming and to be warm and to be able to teach and to help people and to do all of our work with wanting people to feel and be actually safe. And that's been a tightrope so many institutions, Bethel included, have had to walk. Anti-Semitism has been at the core of not only some who have experienced a tremendous sea change in how we see ourselves. It has caused any number of Jews to identify. Lydia spoke about this with respect to October 7th, and there is no question but that this has been a major, major impetus behind individuals really coming to the fore and saying, I didn't know how Jewish I really felt until this happened, and now I do. And this is something that is ongoing. We've had debates about the proper definition of anti-Semitism, whether it's from the IRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, Jerusalem definition of anti-Semitism, which takes issue with it. Harvard, and I didn't have a chance to really absorb the details today, came out with a new definition of anti-Semitism in light of all of the campus protests and the connection between anti-Zionist expression and anti-Semitism. But all of these things really are something that really speaks to the sense that we have questions very often about our safety. And if there is that experience of what the way we walk through life, what does it do to our self-image? What does it do to our desire to have something being passed on to a new generation? Some of the colloquial kinds of definitions of what anti-Semitism, somebody who hates Jews more than one ought to, already says it all. The dean of Jewish history at Columbia, Salah Baron, used to talk about the dislike of the unlike as being particularly oriented towards Jews. So many of us carry this burden, and many of us, in the course of the Jewish experience, have tried to get away from it, have sought in many, many respects for us to hide that element as a matter of it being an albatross around one's neck. And we've spoken before about classic Jewish experiences of trying to get to a different kind of place, either through an accommodation with the broader world. That expression of Aleph Dalet Gordon, be a person on the street, be a person on the street and a Jew at home, make it a private affair essentially, as opposed to being very publicly proud and declarative of this identity, and ultimately leading to a Jewish posture of renewed strength and independence, which is very much a part of Zionism. So I think that there is this whole idea of how resonant this is for all of you. Many of you have shared with me experiences from your lives, the fights you got into, how you were perhaps attacked by simply being Jewish, discrimination on the job, in the army, in the armed services, in other avenues of life, a job that you couldn't get. Lord knows, in this community, the medical community, we have seen, especially with one of the hospitals, a concerted effort to keep Jews out. That's why the whole Sinai hospital system began throughout the country. And unfortunately, there are elements of that return now, because there are Jewish physicians who are stating that they're finding that there are people who will not see them simply because they are Jewish and will go to another provider because they don't want to see a Jewish physician. So things have a way of coming full circle. So this is very much a part. How much has this been an identity formative thing for you? A sense of they're not going to take us seriously, not let us be. Therefore, we had better identify ourselves because this is who we are, and we have to be on the defensive. Knowing that there are people who are going to say, that's not for me. There is a generational divide on this, and there's a very legitimate question that has gone back. How much do we make this the basis of Jewish identity? How much do we state that we have to be careful not conveying the idea, especially to children, that to be a Jew is to join the voyage of the damned? Because that's the last thing we want to be able to say, have to say. Yes, to be alert and vigilant, but not to say that being a Jew fundamentally is to be under threat all the time. That's not a message for us to convey. So in light of what we talked about last week about Rabbi Daniel Hartman's kind of distinction of the Genesis Jewish experience, which is largely a hereditary kind of thing, a peoplehood kind of thing, if you will, and the Exodus kind of experience, which is very much a way of identifying with Jewish values, there are others who've stated that really what we are looking at is the ethnic in conveying forth and bringing forth the ethic. That the people is put as a people is not the be all and end all, but rather there is the framework of being a people that allows us a framework in order to be able to bring something to our community, to enact values, to live a certain kind of way, and to be this hopefully clear blessing to the world at large. Let's go on to the next slide for a minute, please. One thing that we need to look at with this is that, and I think this is very significant in our day as well. How many of you, by a show of hands, I can only see a few of you, have ever encountered for yourself or others who were called a name, a negative name by somebody who wanted to vilify you as a Jew? People do that all the time, right, with other ethnic groups as well. And I don't want to state what they are, but there is something ironic. The book of Esther, which for us is actually a far more deep and profound book than we think of it, because it's linked with Purim, it's fun, it's carnival-like, it's a farce in terms of how we take everything on there. But as we noted last week, when Mordecai says to Esther, who knows, but you were created to be the saving force in this time. Going backwards in an earlier chapter, Haman says to Ahasuerus, look what he says. There's a certain people scattered and dispersed among the other peoples. This is a trope too. They don't obey. They're a fifth column. They're scattered. They're almost like a virus that is going to invade, and they don't even bear the honor of having a name. It's the opposite of name calling. They're anonymous. They're just them. They're the other. And the degree to which sometimes we can be approached as saying you are not even worthy of a name is it's self-demeaning. It's self-demeaning. And so we may have a question of opinion whether we like to be called Jewish by identification. We want to be called a Jew. We want to be called a member of the Hebrew experience, whatever it might be. But if others are not prepared to say that you merit a name in the first place, this too is something that we encounter and is a realm of temporary anti-Semitism. That's why people, when they want to identify persecution, will say their name, because they are people. And sometimes we have not even merited, just a certain people. Okay, go on to the next slide, please. Let's shift gears. Pride in peoplehood gets expressed in this way. I can't count the number of times I've received an email from some of you, perhaps, or certainly from members of the congregation and beyond. Just look at how many of the current year's Nobel Prize winners are Jewish. And this is, I think, not even a full list. And why is this? Why is this, we might wonder. Mordecai Kaplan, great Jewish thinker of the 20th century, believed that the insistence on universal compulsory Jewish education for children, this is well before our American public schools got on that bandwagon, that compulsory education for children beginning when they were 3 was already old for this. And yes, it was Jewish texts, but it was a give and take that is characteristic of Jewish learning as a whole, which is to question and to argue and to push back and to look at different perspectives. That is a training ground for many different kinds of thinking, but also training especially for science. Scientific thinking, I don't have to tell anybody here, has as its merits, you test hypotheses and you have information that is given to you that is subject to analysis, withering analysis, rational exploration of ideas and anticipating counter arguments. It may be in a religious realm, but that's the hallmark of Jewish experience. So Jews were trained almost at a very young age to be able to say, the way to advance knowledge in the world is to do something that is the opposite of what the world thinks of when it comes to religion. If you study the beginning of Pirkei Avot has this beginning saying, here is the tradition, it was passed on from so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and then quickly shift gears and says, and all of a sudden it's about argumentation. This is the opinion of one person. This is the opinion of another person. The whole core of arguing for the sake of heaven, for a good reason, not just to make a point and a counterpoint, is the hallmark of Jewish learning. And so we have this pride. We have this gut pride that says, you know, when something good happens to the Jews in the newspaper or something positive in the world, we look for Jewish names, as it were, that ethnic aspect. If there's a shanda, if there's a catastrophe, if there's a scandal, oy vavoy, there's Jewish names. Okay, we hang our heads in shame. But again, there is more to it than just that kind of puppy love, if you will, for our fellow individuals who are part of this tradition. And it's complicated a little bit by the realities of what the Jewish world is about. Let's go on to the next slide. I just wanted to raise a point of combination. Just as we made the point last week that in an ideal world, we are both Genesis Jews and Exodus Jews. We are both people who take our ethnic backgrounds seriously and learn from that history and look at the ethic, if you will, the values. So just a little anecdote about Shmuel Yosef Adnon. He's a great writer. Many of his works have been translated into English. Trying to see the realities, you can see by his picture, he was a religious Jew, but really probed the depths of humanity and family relationships and the in a very, very sophisticated way, as well as kind of stories about the old country. There was a sign on his street in Jerusalem that said, quiet, writer at work. So that was a sweet little thing. So in December of 1966, he wins the Nobel Prize for Literature. He goes to Sweden to receive the award. So it happens during Hanukkah. So he tells people he can't go. It's a Saturday night. He can't go to the award ceremony because he has to stop first and light Hanukkah candles. And then he says, it was Shabbat. I couldn't shave. I need to shave. He makes the whole place wait for him in order to do that. He's not going to give up on his Jewishness. And then he does something that is really very interesting. I don't know if you know this. There is only yesterday, absolutely good recommendation, Michael, that there is a special blessing to be recited whenever one sees a secular head of state. And he's sitting next to the king of Sweden, who is hard of hearing, and they're chatting, they're having a conversation. And the further delay in the ceremony was such that at a certain point, Agnon pauses to recite a Hebrew blessing, which he translates, so that the king of Sweden can be acknowledged Jewishly. The point of this being, it is possible to merge these two realms. It is possible to see that the identification of our identity in many different ways from our history and being proud of it, as well as being a part of the experience of what do Jewish values say to the world in the first place, even separate from nationalism, separate from a group identity. That these are things, especially a younger generation, cohorts of generations believe, this speaks to them more, frankly, than ethnic history. And it's something that we should bear witness to and be aware of. Let's go on, please. I want to talk a little bit with us about Tikkun Olam. Fair to say that most of us have heard the term? Okay. If anything, it is one of the most common terms in Jewish life. You can see by the picture here that Tikkun Olam, translated as repair of the world, is something that is so powerful that the old story is, forgive me if you've heard it before, that a group of Jewish tourists land in Israel and they're being taken around into various places, and then ask their Israeli guides at a certain point, how do you say Tikkun Olam in Hebrew? Because it's so much a part of the parlance of our lives, repair of the world, that we think it's just a part of the English language, like chutzpah and a bunch of other things. Go ahead to the next slide, please. We actually encounter it every single day in our prayers. The second paragraph of, yeah, you got it, in the second paragraph of the land, we say every single day. We hope to see you, God, soon to see your splendor. And the context here, sweeping idolatry, obviously even idolatries away, so that false gods will be utterly destroyed, perfecting earth by your sovereignty. That's my last little translation, B'malchut Shaddai, under God's sovereignty. I would argue maybe a better translation is to repair the world by your sovereignty. So we could have a nice hour-and-a-half conversation about this paragraph alone, but look at the framework here. This is a sense of there are multiple gods in the world, and the false gods that are there are not just simply gods that are worshipped by other peoples, but are also those that lead astray, that lead to things in biblical history like child sacrifice, all sorts of bizarre fertility cults, all sorts of things that run against the grain of Jewish values. So to repair the world is to say that there's ultimately one deity, only one, that's monotheism, around this universe of ours, in charge, if you will, that should be worshipped, because the other gods will lead us astray into things like worshiping pharaohs, into doing things that are very much against the values of our experience. Next slide, please. A little history. The idea of Tikkun Olam also comes from something that sounds really quite unusual to many people. That is a doctrine that had an opportunity to lift the spirits up of Jewish exiles from Spain in 1492. Before that, the Jews were very welcome in Spain to varying degrees in the last several years, hundreds of years beforehand. There was largely great interreactions, relations on many levels is for part of that time, a lot of that time with the Islamic world. But the kicking out of the Jews, the exodus of Jews, the destruction of Jewish life really was a traumatic experience. And in the midst of that, an expression of Jewish mysticism steps in and says, in brief, this world contains within it sparks that are hidden throughout the universe that are kind of the outflowing of the initial experience of God's creation. The world couldn't even contain these vessels that God used to create the world, and they are these sparks. And what do these sparks need to do? They need to go back home to God. And the Jew has a unique role in this world. When you light Shabbat candles, when you pray, when you give tzedakah, whatever the mitzvah is, you take a spark and you return it back to God. Imagine the sense of power that somebody had, kicked out of their homes, not knowing what their future would be, the sense that their religious expressions, each of them, had the capacity to, as it were, help God out, if you will. Now, I don't need you to say that this is something you agree with or disagree with. That, it's complicated. I'm not concerned that, I'm not trying to convince you, certainly, that this is the way the world works. But I want us to see that in a northern town of the land of Israel, Tzfat, which exists to this day as a really magnificent and wonderful, and very beautiful place, that Jews were looking for ways to be able to talk about how to be part of the cosmic mysteries of the world. What was this called? Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world, the returning of the sparks. Next slide, please. But now it's different. Repair of the world is ubiquitous. Social justice is its largely clear expression. Many Jews consider it a cornerstone of their Jewish identity, a key reason they're committed to making the world a better place. And the reason why this is, I think, significant for us in many respects is that, this is not without its own controversy. Critics of this reality say that social justice, or tikkun olam, is the religion of the assimilated. In other words, people that would never have a sense of what the Jewish experience is all about, think that if they march in Washington on Martin Luther King Day or whatever else, that they're doing something very Jewish, and that gets them off the hook, so to speak, for anything else. I reject that categorically. I cannot tell you for how many people it was a mystery, it was a new discovery to see that to get out into the world and to do things for the world at large, not Jewish defense concerns. This has been something that to be able to make a difference in the world on a broader level as a very Jewish thing has made them identify Jewishly in ways they probably never would. If somebody kind of ended their Jewish education at 12 or 13 and had this image of God as being, Judaism as being prayer, and in the older days where the media wasn't nearly as good, it was like Hanukkah coloring books, and a few memories here and there, and that was Judaism. Say that Judaism cared about the environment or cared about oppressed populations in Asia under the Chinese or in Tibet, wherever it might be, was a revelation to them. Next slide. A tiny, tiny portion of Jewish organizations that have nothing much really to do with the Jewish community per se. But these are all organizations that are there to make a difference in their own way in the world at large. Yes, some of these have become problematic situations because of their stance on human rights and Israel and Zionism and all sorts of kinds of challenging things. There is no question about it. Great drama and trouble several years ago in terms of the initial first Trump administration with the Women's March on Washington, and some of the women who were there who did not welcome Jewish expressions at that time. Pride marches that did not welcome Jewish expressions because of the sense of Zionism being a form of a great evil, and Jews identifying with that, and so forth. So it's not without its controversy. But the idea of rolling up our sleeves and going out there and making a difference for people at large is an expression that has been a very, very powerful impulse. I know that it motivates many of you. Next slide, please. Okay, before we get to this, this is a closing piece. I want to just mention a couple of things. Another question for you, and that is this. Is it possible for you to come up with a sense that as you understand Judaism and its role it plays in your life, that not only does it do things that perhaps make you feel comfortable, make you feel good, but does it exert any demands upon you? Let me clarify what I mean. Some of us might remember, or at least have read about the season of inaugurations, Kennedy's inaugural talk. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. As citizens of a nation, do we have freely chosen obligations other than what the law requires? As citizens, so to speak, whether we happen to have been born into it or we have chosen it freely, is there something within our experience as Jews that says, you know, we need to do something? There are things you need to do to be offer a legitimate experience of what this idea of Judaism is all about. One idea that I just want to mention to you in passing is that in the 19th century, there was an idea that Judaism's primary concern is what is called ethical monotheism. It's not just that there's one God, but this God requires a sense of embracing of goodness. This God wants us to be, as it were, good. Personal ethics of integrity and fairness and compassion, and in the world making a difference. There are different kinds of monotheisms. There could be a monotheism that says that the God of the universe wants you to have the right faith. And if you don't have exactly the right faith, you need not apply. Or the God of the universe wants you to defeat on the military battlefield any and all enemies who might encroach upon your sense of what your territorial integrity ought to be. It can be all sorts of things. But Hermann Cohn and others in the 19th century said the Jewish experience is how to put goodness at the core of our lives. And I want us to ponder what that might mean for us. It doesn't mean that there are no other things that are important, that there are connections between that and what we would call ritual and prayer and fasting and all of those things. But what is the rock upon which we stand? I want to close with something that is meant to be a little musical expression of hope. One thing we didn't really focus on because of time, I'd like to get back to it maybe a little bit, is that a lot of us, because of where our families trace from, have been kind of accused of being what they call, here's a good word, you may have not encountered it in everyday life, Ashkenanormative. Ashkenanormative. A good part of the Jewish world did not experience the Holocaust because they were in the Middle Eastern countries. They had many other problems, many other issues of persecution, but their traditions, the foods they ate, the experience of so many other kinds of languages, they didn't know Yiddish. They had no clue what Yiddish was about. Hebrew, yes, but not Yiddish. And on so many levels, very, very different. And you get to this day, you get into a taxi, as I did recently in Israel, and I knew what to say to the driver. Alan, how are you? Good. How are you? It's a word of basically shalom, but it's Arabic. Just as yalla, let's go, and just as you're going to eat hummus because which is not hummus. Please don't say. We have to treat all of the grocery stores. They have to learn the Hebrew pronunciation. Hummus doesn't cut it. Hummus, which is an Arabic food. But we have it on pita all the time, also an Arabic food. It's a mixture of that. And Jews grew up in those lands before they were ceremoniously kicked out, largely in the aftermath of 1948, 800,000 strong, kicked out. And or other elements with Israeli history we'll talk about another time. But there is that sense of what they grew up with, growing up with God being called Allah, growing up with the music and the cultural experience of the time. So I would like to think that with all of the tensions, all of the animosity, all of the experiences of deep, deep abiding pain that we have seen in the last, Lord knows how many decades, never mind the last year and a half, here we have an experience that I wanted to just share with you. We are hearing Sha'ar Petach Dodi, may my beloved open up this gate. The language is Hebrew. It's from our tradition. It's a traditional phrase. Listen to the nuances of the melody and see how it flows. So we're going to listen to about a minute of this, and we'll make a closing statement after that.
שער פתח דודי, שער פתח דודי, קומה פתח שער, קומה פתח שער, כי נבהלה נפשי, כי נבהלה נפשי, גם נסערה סהר, גם נסערה סהר, לילה.
Here we can stop there. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you were able to hear the nuances here. They're pretty clear, I think. They were very much from Arabic music. And if you didn't know the language, or you were just listening to the melody without hearing the words, or you might have thought, well, I turned on the station from Jordan. But the ability to say we are able to look at, for the furtherance of Jewish expression and to broaden Jewish expression, even things from a culture that is very different than ours in so many ways, and very much at odds and very much antagonistic, if you will, currently, at least on a cultural level, I think gives me some hope. It gives me some hope that this is an experience that we can take in, be able to say that down the road, Jews and residents of Gaza can once again shop in the same markets, that this can be a reality of some peace and reconciliation that we seem very, very far from today, and that Jewish identity is so textured and rich that sometimes it surprises you where you wind up getting some of the influences. So I am done for the day. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we're past 8 o'clock. I don't know, Lydia, if we have a chance to take maybe one or two quick questions or ideas that somebody might wish to offer.
Absolutely. I went over my time. It's not Rabbi's fault. It's my fault. Sorry, everyone.
No, it's okay, but it is after.
I don't have any questions in the chat. I don't know if anyone has a question. I will say it's I definitely resonated with one thing that you said. You talked about, looking for Jewish names, right, in good news. Every time there's a Jewish hockey player, I show my children, and apparently they the juniors just won gold in the junior world championships in the last few weeks, and one of their players who had a gazillion points, goals and assists points, was Jewish, and it went around the family text chain. So we definitely do the same thing.
Okay, great. And I'll just close by saying some of you have sent some thoughts or questions my way in between last week and this week. Please feel free to do that for this coming week, and we'll try to take up some of those as best we can. And thank you so much. I think speaking for Lydia, we're both very honored and so happy you joined us tonight and last week as well. And we look forward to continuing to learn with everybody and to hear everyone's insights. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening.